Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician and an intimate marriage expert, and I specialize in showing couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships. I've been married for 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing relationship. If you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how now. Let's dive in. Welcome to episode number 59 of the Intimate Marriage Podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you. It was so incredible to launch this podcast on Valentine's Day 2021. And this episode is completing season 1. And when I think back about season 1, there is so much to say, but the place I want to begin is this. How many of you read Anna Karenina? That's a book that used to be such a staple for high schools, and I don't think people who graduate have even heard the name for the most part. So if you're not familiar with it, it's an amazing novel by Leo Tolstoy, a Russian novelist from days gone by. And it is about a woman who is young and vivacious, who's married to an older, dry man and falls in love with this incredibly magnetic man. We'll just leave it like that. And the opening to the book is this. I'm going to read it. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. That was a line that I knew because I read Anna Karenina in high school and intermittently love reading Tolstoy. Not always, but sometimes. So it was a familiar line. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And when I was in medical school, I remember my first year just wandering around in the bookstore. Yes, I was getting the textbooks I needed for my own classes, but I also was just walking around. And I remember in the section for the psychologists, there was a book that I picked up, and the opening paragraph quoted this from Tolstoy about all happy families being alike, and says that actually that's exactly wrong. It's the opposite that's true, that unhappy families follow patterns of dysfunction and in that way are similar. Whereas happy families, it's a creative process. It's unique to the individuals. It is intrinsically motivated, and having a happy family is really a unique achievement. And there aren't specific rules that when you follow them, you will have a happy family. Well, I share this because I think there's something very similar about a fantastic relationship. There definitely are particular tools, orientations, ways of being, which I teach, but I'm not teaching them so that when you do that, you will have a great relationship. That's not how it works. I'm really teaching, actually, let me put it this way. You know, the saying that if someone is hungry, you can give them a fish or you can teach them how to fish. That's a perfect analogy for the way in which I coach couples. The equivalent of being hungry is that they want more happiness, more joy, more pleasure, more connection, more self-expression in the relationship. And it's not really possible to do the equivalent of giving them a fish and have it do anything other than create a nice weekend, a nice month. But to have the real transformation, which you can then sustain for the rest of your life, well, you need to learn to fish. You need to learn how to be with yourself and your partner in a way that is authentic for you and works in every situation. And so when I designed the Aligned and Hot Marriage program, I absolutely had this principle in mind, because I can't tell you how many couples I've spoken with who want to coach with me. And I ask if they've ever had any therapy or coaching before. And they say, yeah, we worked with a therapist and it helped for a little while. I am not interested in helping for a little while. I am interested in teaching you how to fish. In other words, giving you the tools so that you can create your happy relationship, because it's the unhappy relationship that follows formulas and patterns. So this is my context for recapping the richness of season 1 of the Intimate Marriage podcast, because I spoke with, I didn't actually count them up, but a lot of different couples. And really, each one shared something different, something unique that contributes to their happiness, gratification, and growing pleasure with one another. So I'm going to go through the episodes and share some of the things that really stood out for me in speaking with other couples. And I'm sharing it to inspire you, because at the point at which you have a fantastic relationship, I'm sure that if I interviewed you, you'd have something else to say, because every incredible couple is uniquely incredible. And yet, as we learn to fish, we can certainly benefit from talking to other fishermen. So going back to the day that I launched, when I released a bunch of different episodes, the one that really sticks out for me first is my conversation with Melanie Ann Layer and Kevin Bruce Scott. And I think one of the things that they said, which I've never forgotten, is how they do not need one another. They desire one another. And that informs their relationship and how they show up for one another. So if one or the other of them is feeling kind of needy, they handle that themselves so that they are drawn together by desire. When I spoke with Monica and Ben Tanner, what really sits with me from that interview is how you can totally love and support your spouse, and you do not need to be interested in the things that they are interested in. Monica used to feel like she needed to go to all of Ben's games. He's a coach, and get all into the sports when actually it doesn't interest her. But there's a way that she can totally support him and his passion without actually having it herself. So I'm just flipping through. I'm not actually going to name every single episode, but another one that catches my attention is Christy Arnett and Andrew Moreno. And when I interviewed them, it was after years of infertility, miscarriage, and I just want you to know that they did have their baby, who is this beautiful butterball of presence. It's so good. And the message that sits with me from that conversation, they're both professional poker players, so they're really used to managing risk at the poker table, and they devoted themselves. They built their relationship in a way that includes risk with one another. And what that means is that they go for it when there's something awkward to say or when they don't agree. They risk, and it always brings them closer. It can feel pretty edgy, but it brings them closer. Let's see, Jen Kem and Nathan Francisco. She is really an entrepreneur extraordinaire. She's built multiple 8-figure businesses, and he also is an entrepreneur, and they take what they have learned and know from their businesses and apply it to their relationship. And they get together once a quarter to review things. I don't think they call it KPIs, but they look at what their goals are and where things need to be adjusted the way you would when running a business. They bring that same thinking to make sure that if something needs attention, they give it attention. It doesn't just linger and then rear its ugly head years later. And I want to refer to the episode with Deepa Kannan and Shyam Nair, a seemingly, at first glance, traditional Indian couple that actually lives in India. Each of them previously married and divorced and felt that they couldn't really be themselves in their first marriages. So one of the things that makes theirs a happy relationship is that they have a full-on agreement and permission to say everything to one another, or rather say anything. So they do not hold back. They will have screaming arguments. They will express the most exquisite tenderness. They bring it all. And boy, is it hot, connected, and steamy. That's a really great example of how a couple creates a really happy relationship in their unique way. And that wouldn't work for everyone, but it really works for them. It's incredibly beautiful. I'm going next to the episode with Dr. Vanessa Calderon. She is an expert on stress and burnout, and we had such an incredible conversation about stress and burnout in the context of marriage, particularly because being vulnerable leads to connection. But what Dr. Calderon said is that if something feels vulnerable, then it inherently is stressful. I'm not really sure if I'm sold on that, I have to say. But there is something to honoring the physiology in our bodies when we take a risk and agree with ourselves to be vulnerable and actually share. And I think one of the main reasons that I'm not sure if I'm sold on that is because when we have physiological stress and are in fight, flight, freeze, or faint, the healthy thing is to let it go. But in the context of a relationship, the stress that arises, if that's what it is, when we make a vulnerable communication, we don't want to let that go. We want to continue to be making vulnerable communication. So I don't feel like I have the bottom line on that, but it's such an interesting thing to consider. And especially when pacing yourself and making vulnerable communications, you want to be sure that you stay grounded and present and you don't check out in a stress response. So maybe it's that dance with being edgy, stretching, but still staying within a realm of relative safety. I'm interested what you think of that. I interviewed two of my children, my daughter Josephine on her 25th birthday, and actually my son Matthew, it was his birthday, but I didn't say so in the episode. And I really loved hearing their reflections of what it is to be in our family and what it is to be the children of a couple that has a pretty juicy relationship. And I've had a few parents actually reach out and say that they were going to adjust the questions to fit their circumstances, but ask their children the same, because these are things that we don't know, we assume. But when your children are old enough, it's so interesting to ask their reflections on what it is to be a member of your own family. And it can really help guide where you want to put your attention next, and certainly be a cause for celebration. I loved my conversation with Dr. Brent Lacey. Oh my goodness, he told a story about a couple who were having a lot of fights and financial difficulties. And at the core of it, it came to not telling one another the whole story until they got the guidance from his coaching, because he wanted to send a really significant portion of their income back to his family in Indonesia. And she raised in America with many generations of Americans in her family, really wondered why they needed to live in a much smaller place and have a car that wasn't the one she wanted and not go on the vacation she dreamed of, since they both were working hard and earning a lot. But it wasn't possible to do that while sending the money back to his family in Indonesia. And when he got vulnerable and described the sacrifices that they made in order for him to come to the United States and become a doctor, the whole thing made sense. Now, that's a unique story, but the point is that how we handle our money, especially in interacting with our spouse, it is heavily influenced by emotional content that just feels so normal and obvious to ourselves. But when you actually express it to your partner, it will really ease those communications. It was really exciting talking with Nick and Dr. Elaine Staggerberg, and they both share that they prioritize one another's experiences, feelings, desires, and interests over their own. And that has transformed their marriage in the most incredible ways. And I found it so interesting to listen to that, because on the one hand, just being more in your own world creates a disconnection. And so what they describe about prioritizing their partner's experience creates connection, awareness, and it really expands you. In the conversation I had with them, I didn't give my input, but I want to clarify that a little bit more, because from my perspective, the energy, vibrancy, and erotic chemistry that is so alive in their marriage, it's not specifically because they're prioritizing their partner's experience. I think it's that once each of them chose to prioritize the other one's experience, all of their own inner material came to the surface and needed to be dealt with in order to be present, loving, free, and clear, and honoring of their partner without resentment. And so it can look like, from how they speak about it, and this may be their experience, that putting attention on their partner has transformed their relationship. And yes, put your attention on your partner, of course, but fundamentally, you're going to be putting your attention on your own experience even more, so that you can attend to it and be in a position to generously honor your partner's experience. This is kind of a sophisticated point, but I think it's really important as well. The last episode, number 58, was with Jonathan and Sasha Schlossberg, Schlossberg. And I loved hearing how playful and visionary, and how they, like, to me personally, to live that way, it feels a little chaotic. But once again, this is how they make their relationship and their family happy, is they are juggling so many different balls all at once, with homeschooling 4 children under the age of 7 and running a business together. And their living room has a vision board with their business values and a vision board with their family values, and they're handing things off to one another. And it's like they're dancing through family life, parenting, and business in this way that works. It's like a complicated choreography, but it sure sounds like it is beautiful and gratifying, and makes for a successful business, successful family, and a very successful marriage as well. So again, as I said at the beginning, I wanted to draw on a little bit of what was revealed in my various interviews with people, because it really deeply illustrates the through line in season 1 of the Intimate Marriage podcast, which is concluding today, in that every couple uniquely creates a fantastic relationship. Every couple who has a fantastic relationship. And just as you can learn to fish. I'm not the one to teach you that, but one can. You can really learn to have a uniquely fantastic relationship. And there's really nothing more important for you, for your marriage, for your family legacy, meaning your children, for success in business, for success in the world at large, for having the courage to face all the crazy difficulties of our society currently. One of the absolute best ways to manage your life is to prioritize your relationship, which is what we're all about. So that is my recap for season 1. And I want to tell you, I am so excited because I've already started planning season 2, and I haven't decided 100%, but I think I'm going to release it on March 2nd, which is a day of celebration for me and my husband, because we'll be celebrating our 26th wedding anniversary. And what better way to celebrate than by releasing season 2? So be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you're notified when the next season begins. And please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It really means so much to me. It influences how I will design further seasons, and it helps other people know what they can find when they come to the podcast. So please leave a rating and review wherever you listen, and know that I'm available while the podcast has a little hibernation before season 2. I'll be here continuing to coach and teach and serve you in whatever way I can.
Thank you for listening to the Intimate Marriage Podcast. For more information about Alexandra, her book, and her coaching services, go to theintimatemarriagepodcast.com.